Does this sound familiar? You're listening to someone talk about something they're incredibly passionate about, but feel intense boredom or hollowness inside. You might have absolutely no interest in what they're discussing, but what if you want to feel the same enthusiasm for something you do care about? Let's dive into how some people can find interest in the most mundane things, how to find it yourself to perhaps reignite that spark for nature journaling, and most importantly, how to never get bored nature journaling. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today, I want to chat about those times when you either get bored nature journaling or find there's nothing interesting nearby to nature journal. So firstly, what is boredom? Boredom has to do with feeling disinterested in a subject or our surroundings, or we find an activity dull or tedious. One very important thing to note is that boredom is a perception. So two people in the same environment can experience completely opposite emotions, one boredom, the other excitement. Being bored isn't a mental state that most people find pleasant. They crave some kind of stimulation. But it's possible to change your mind so that something that you used to consider boring now is rather interesting. So how can we make this happen? I've mentioned this in my previous video. The key to changing your perception is to change your perspective. By changing perspective, we allow for new experiences and opportunities to explore. We change from the person being bored in the same environment to the person that's excited. So you can do this either by physically moving around to a new viewpoint, or for example finding a different focus through a new exercise so that you're looking at a boring old subject with fresh eyes. This is crucial to practice beginner's mind, which is a Zen Buddhism technique used by nature journalers to have an attitude of openness and curiosity like a beginner would. This mental shift can be even more powerful than a physical change. An inherent part of nature journaling is to tap into our curiosity. Curiosity is the antithesis and cure to boredom. To practice and build your sense of curiosity, ask questions. Children are the perfect example of this. They have to learn so much about the world around them and how it all works. And they do this by observing others with curiosity, mimicking them, using trial and error, and asking many questions. Sometimes they can even ask a question, and before waiting for an answer, they're already asking the next one. For ideas on how to ask more questions, check out my previous video. I'll link it in the description and up here. Journaling with others can help stimulate further interest in an object as well, because there's literally more eyes. Your friend might spot something you hadn't noticed, or maybe you will ask an interesting question that could prompt them to keep exploring. Apart from the obvious issues with boredom, one that can cause a negative effect is that it can lead to difficulty concentrating. This isn't ideal for learning about our environment or for completing the activity. Now, the reason why we feel bored could be due to the task being too easy, as in we actually got more than enough skill to complete what is a moderate challenge. Realizing this about ourselves can let us adjust the difficulty of the task to provide more stimulation and make it more challenging. So, do you always draw birds? Can you recognize them just from their call and know all the ones in your area? Well, go for a hike to a new place with unfamiliar birds, or perhaps focus on something different like what they're eating, or drawing the trees and the landscapes they're in instead. Extend beyond what you know and aim to learn something new about them each time you add an entry in your journal. Being bored because a task is too easy is a sign that you're ready to level up. Just remember it takes courage to move forward, so finding the right step size is important to ensure you don't become overwhelmed but grow instead. But what if it's not you getting bored? There's just nothing interesting to nature journal. Then I say to you, go back and listen to the first part. Because finding something boring or interesting is all in the mind, and there is interesting nature everywhere. Many people would search for something that will let them experience awe or wonder that day. Now, I would argue that it's easier to find awe when we're traveling or experiencing something new. Our mind is open to accepting all this information around us and is already alert to spotting differences. So going away for a trip or even just a day hike to a new place is ideal to experience that awe and wonder again. Keep in mind though, we don't have to experience something new. It's possible to feel awe and wonder in the old as well. Watching the sun rise is a great example of something we've probably seen before, but can still feel a joyful experience each time we see it. This is what beginner's mind is all about. Now, as a child, everything is new and therefore interesting to learn about. But as adults who have experienced it many times, we can lose interest because it just doesn't apply to our safety or daily concerns. So to fight this, to combat this, by slowing down and pausing and looking closely at something we've dismissed, we can learn to appreciate the wonder and experience awe in nature again. So look again at something you're familiar with and ask yourself, what's new this time? What haven't I seen yet? You certainly don't need to travel far to find nature nearby. And don't fall into the trap either of thinking that the only interesting nature is in parks or remote places. Search and you might be surprised at just how interesting nature can be right at your doorstep if you look closely enough. Try your local green space or playground. Now, interesting doesn't have to be exotic, but if you do want to focus on something that's not nearby or you just can't access it, then there are a few ways of approaching this. Firstly, the internet is a glorious thing that allows us to watch online virtual tours, for example, or use Google Earth to visit the other side of the world, and to spy on animals using zoo webcams. There are documentaries we can watch, for example, David Attenborough, but equally useful could just be browsing footage from our last holiday. One of the tips in my previous video to help you when you're stuck is to keep a folder, either digital or physical, full of inspiring images and ideas. So check it out for more tips if you haven't already. How do you get around feeling bored or finding interesting nature? Share your tips and questions in the comments below. And for future videos like this, let me know what you struggle with when you're nature journaling. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll catch you in the next video.